Hello, hello. Welcome to the From Theory to Practice, the Evolution and Challenges of Multicultural Education with Dr. Katerina Zizuli. She's got a PhD in American Lit, Culture, and Ideology. She's taught writing, literature, and philosophy. And, ooh, I'm envious. She held a Yale University fellowship. And the fun thing is, since I'm a writer, I always love to lean into those in the process of publishing their first novel, which, Katerina, if you have time at the end, if you want to tell us a little bit about it or when it's coming out, we like to support other writers who are practicing their craft. So that's kind of a fun thing. We're just going to go through the presentation, and then we will have time for Q&A at the end. And I'll read the questions so that everybody can hear it. And let's have some fun. Katerina, all on you.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to talk about the evolution and challenges of multicultural education. Since Jane Elliott's brown eye, blue eye exercise in 1968, there have been drastic changes in what we've come to call multicultural education today. Yet the proverb, the more things change, the more they remain the same, still endures. For instance, concepts such as bicultural education, cross-cultural education, intercultural education, pluricultural education, or transcultural education has sprung up in discussions and have been included in conference presentations, academic papers, and books. In recent years, numerous theories based on these concepts have been developed. Yet the epistemological paradigms for these concepts have been ambiguous and in some cases quite perplexing. As we delve into the specific methodologies of multicultural education, it's important to highlight its key components. Cross-cultural education, for instance, is a structured educational approach recommended for Western countries to manage cultural diversity and promote national cohesion. It aims to foster mutual respect, understanding, and communication among diverse groups and individuals by focusing on characteristics and differences among cultures and by analyzing human behavior in various cultural, geographic, and social settings. In other words, it's used to indicate a comparison between two or more cultures. Bicultural education, on the other hand, is based on one's ability to use two languages with equal fluency, as it is assumed that such a learner would also traverse between two cultures. This is different from monocultural bilinguals who may speak two languages, their mother tongue and a foreign language, but are not immersed in more than one cultural background. The concept of pluriculturalism, according to the Council of Europe, encompasses cultural knowledge, awareness, and experience in social situations. These definitions lead to the original definition of multiculturalism, a term first used in 1941, which refers to the inclusion and appreciation of multiple cultures within a society. It is a social and educational theory that encourages interest in various cultures rather than focusing solely on the mainstream culture. This philosophy promotes the idea that all cultures within a society deserve equal respect and scholarly attention, recognizing the value of diversity and encouraging people to learn from the contributions of individuals from diverse cultural backgrounds. Theoretically, many people are familiar with these definitions and understand such concepts. However, in practice, our society is not even close to achieving inclusion and appreciation of different cultures. As Parker Palmer stated in the original, as well as the revised edition of his book, The Courage to Teach, as long as we inhabit a universe made homogeneous by our refusal to admit otherness, we can maintain the illusion that we possess the truth about ourselves and the world. After all, there is no other to challenge us. But as soon as we admit pluralism, we are forced to admit that ours is not the only standpoint. If we embrace the promise of diversity, of creative conflict, and of losing in order to win, we still face one final fear: the fear that a live encounter with otherness will challenge or even compel us to change our lives. This is not paranoia. The world really is out to get us. Otherness, taken seriously, always invites transformation, calling us not only to new facts and theories and values, but also to new ways of living our lives. And that is the most daunting threat of all. Reflecting on this, Jane Elliott's exercise from 56 years ago remains profoundly relevant today. Elliott, a third grade teacher in Riceville, Iowa, gave us an overwhelming example of how children learn racism and prejudice. The day after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in April 1968, Elliott decided to teach her third graders a lesson in discrimination, which carried far beyond the sympathetic indifference toward racism she saw in her all-white, all-Christian community. Her lesson began with a question. I don't think we really know what it would be like to be a Black child, do you? I mean, it would be hard to know, really, unless we actually experience discrimination ourselves, wouldn't it? Elliott went on, suppose we divided the class into blue-eyed and brown-eyed people. Suppose for the rest of the day, the blue-eyed people became the inferior group. Then on Monday, we could revise it so that the brown-eyed people were inferior. Wouldn't that give us a better understanding of what discrimination means? What followed surprised and overwhelmed Elliott. By the lunch hour, there was no need to think before identifying a child as blue or brown-eyed. The brown-eyed children were happy, alert, having the time of their lives. And they were doing far better work than they had ever done before. The blue-eyed children were miserable. Their posture, expressions, and entire attitudes were those of defeat. Their classroom work regressed sharply from the day before. Within an hour or so, they looked and acted as though they were in fact inferior. It was shocking. Even more alarming was how the brown-eyed children turned on their friends from the day before, accepting almost immediately as truth what had originally been described as an exercise. They actually believed they were superior. Consequently, the brown-eye, blue-eye exercise is grounded in role theory. Proponents of simulation exercises argue that by taking the role of a member of an oppressed group, participants develop empathy for members of stigmatized populations. According to role theory, simulation exercise participants assume the cognitive perspective of a member of a stigmatized group and appreciate the affective state of an oppressed group's member. These cognitive and emotional experiences lead to changes in participants' behavioral dispositions. In other words, individuals who experience oppression by assuming the role of a member of a stigmatized group are likely to develop empathetic attitudes towards such groups. This psychological process forms the foundation of pro-social behavior that prepares participants to support diversity and inclusion in the classroom. Teachers, in particular, must experience this kind of role-playing activity to fully understand it. Educators must rely on the community to create a shared sense of belonging by providing a safe space where relationships can be built, trust can be developed, and collective learning promoted. Approaching such a sensitive and emotionally charged topic is crucial, and creating a safe space for all students requires the ability to understand it from personal experience. In other words, those who intend to teach diversity and other emotionally charged topics must fully understand the needs of students who are grappling with issues of oppression and cultural diversity. Building on its historical foundations, multicultural education has undergone significant evolution over the past decades, shifting from rudimentary awareness initiatives to a more nuanced and inclusive framework to teaching and learning. Central to this evolution are pivotal moments such as Jane Elliott's influential exercise, which highlight both the persistent challenges and the progress made within multicultural education. Despite these advances, the quest for true inclusion and appreciation of diverse cultures remains a complex and ongoing journey. Oops. There we go. Multicultural education today, with its various approaches, which include cross-cultural, bicultural, and pluricultural education, offers unique perspectives and strategies to foster mutual respect and understanding among diverse groups. However, the practical implementation of these concepts often falls short of their theoretical ideas. Palmer's reflections on the challenges of embracing diversity underscore the need for genuine engagement with otherness and the transformative potential it holds. In addition, culture, defined as the sum total of ways of living, including values, beliefs, aesthetic standards, linguistic expression, patterns of thinking, behavioral norms, and communication styles, is a response of a group to the needs of its members. It has an inherent logic balancing its positive and negative aspects. Culture influences human behavior in deep and persistent ways, often beyond conscious control. Learning about different cultures and embracing diversity is undeniably important. However, because not many educators have worked with the Elliott model while in school, it is crucial to give future teachers the tools to improve themselves as human beings, their instructional methods, and their students' lives. Similarly, Jane Elliott's exercise serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of experiential learning in addressing issues of discrimination and prejudice. Her role-playing activity vividly illustrates how quickly and deeply biases can be internalized, even among young children. This exercise emphasizes the need for educators to go beyond theoretical knowledge and actively engage in creating inclusive learning environments. Elliott's exercise highlights the importance of learning about feelings and overcoming emotional blindness as the basis for judgment. Life is full of values and meanings that some people miss by being oblivious to their own and others' experiences. In many instances, it is easier for us to read about values, diversity, and culture rather than to experience them. Diversity must be seen on many levels as opportunities and possibilities. Educators must seize the opportunity to create a community in which they share what makes the uniqueness of individuals, as well as teach and learn about what people have in common. There are endless possibilities for learning from each other, appreciating one another, and valuing the many cultures and experiences that amalgamate on our schools and campuses at all levels of education. Originally, Elliott may have used this role-playing exercise to teach her students a lesson on racism, but as she said, willful ignorance is dangerous. To tackle the complexities of multicultural education, educators must be equipped with the tools and experiences necessary to foster empathy and understanding. Role-playing exercises grounded in role theory, like Elliott's, can significantly contribute to this goal by allowing participants to experience the perspectives of marginalized groups. By confronting cognitive dissonance and challenging stereotypes, educators can develop the skills needed to support diversity and inclusion effectively. To address these challenges, several solutions can be implemented in cultivating multicultural education. Number one, role-playing and simulation exercises. Utilizing exercises like Jane Elliott's Brown Eye, Blue Eye role-playing activity can help students and educators experience and understand the effects of discrimination and prejudice firsthand. Such experiential learning fosters empathy and awareness. Number two, inclusive curriculum design. Developing curricula that include diverse perspectives and histories can help students appreciate and understand different cultures. This involves integrating multicultural content across subjects and grade levels, including higher education. Number three, professional development for educators, providing ongoing training for teachers on cultural competence, anti-bias education, and inclusive teaching strategies is essential. This equips educators with the knowledge and skills to create inclusive classrooms. Number 4, promoting dialogue and reflection, encouraging open discussions about race, culture, and identity in the classroom helps students explore and challenge their biases. Reflective activities can deepen their understanding of diversity and inclusion. Number 5, building inclusive school communities. Creating a school culture that values and respects diversity involves the active participation of all stakeholders, students, teachers, administrators, and parents. This includes policies and practices that promote equity and inclusion. Number 6, supporting diverse representation. Ensuring that the teaching staff, school leadership, and educational materials reflect the diversity of the student population can provide role models and foster a sense of belonging for all students. And finally, number 7, leveraging technology and resources. Using digital tools and resources to expose students to global perspectives and cultures can enhance their understanding and appreciation of diversity. Virtual exchanges, multimedia resources, and online collaborations can broaden their horizons. The journey toward true cultural inclusion in education is ongoing, requiring continuous reflection, adaptation, and commitment from educators. The lessons from historical exercises like Jane Elliott's, combined with contemporary theories and practices, provide a robust foundation for advancing multicultural education. By embracing the complexities and challenges of diversity, educators can create learning environments that celebrate and respect the rich tapestry of cultures within our communities. And a final word to those who hold privilege, including teachers in primary, secondary, and higher education. Leverage your position to alleviate the burdens faced by those who are constantly under attack. Use your influence to challenge oppressors and become an active voice in the fight for diversity, equity, and inclusion. Commit to dismantling the isms that sustain oppressive systems such as racism, sexism, and other forms of discrimination. By taking these actions, you can contribute meaningfully to creating a more just and equitable society. This is my presentation. Now, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to entertain them. This last slide, I always use the cartoon at the end of my presentations because it represents me. So,
All right, Donna Joy is asking, what are other related studies aside from Elliott's? Are there studies of whites as minorities in Black cultures?
I haven't researched that aspect of no, I don't know. I'm not aware of any. I concentrated on marginalized cultures, studying representation of the majority culture within minority cultures would be a completely different study, but it's an interesting one. I would perhaps I would look into it and maybe come up with a presentation for next year's conference.
When you are looking at minority representation, misrepresentation, besides African American and diverse colored people, what else? Who else is on that list? We were having a conversation at breakfast this morning, and somebody had something Asian countries.
That's a good question. I like that question. I mean, I'm classified as Caucasian, right? I'm originally from Greece. I was born in Greece. I came to the United States to study. And subsequently, I found the love of my life. And I got married and had children and such, and remained in the United States. And it became my first home, actually. I've spent more time in the United States than I've spent in Greece. So I consider myself, because I still have an accent, I came here when I was 21 years old. And the younger people are, when they immerse themselves in a different culture and language, the less accent they retain. I have an accent, and I have experienced discrimination because of my accent. For instance, that might not be the same as the same discrimination as some marginalized groups, but it still is considered discrimination. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. Can you name any more?
Um, well, other than people who look different, there are people who look different in regards to the color of their skin. Then you have people who have medical issues that as a result of which they stand out. Those people experience discrimination as well. Ageism is another one. There was a presentation this morning that I appreciated regarding women, older women. And so I appreciated that presentation, because that's another group that experiences discrimination at various levels, not just in their daily lives, but also professionally and in various settings, even when you go shopping as an older person, or the doctor's office, for instance, as an older person, it's very difficult to have people listen to you. So it works on, for people who are older, it works on many levels. Discrimination can be very subtle. You have to pay attention to really understand where it's coming from and what it is.
Does the group have any questions?
You asked me a question about the book that I'm writing earlier.
Yes.
It's basically historical fiction. There's a lot of philosophy and mythology in it. The main characters are, the main character is a former priestess of Apollo from ancient Greece. And she goes in various adventures that in many cases endanger her life. But I'm still working on it. I've been working on it since 2010, actually, and I haven't been able to actually put it down and decide that this is it and I'm going to stop. I don't know for how long I'll be working on it. Every time I think it's done, something else comes up and I change my mind and I add things to it. Every time I read it, I want to change things. So it's been a long journey with this book. I'm not sure it'll ever be done. I hope it will. I have a publisher who is interested, and I either have to make a decision and stop and send it over to the publisher, or keep going and never publish it.
Right.
It's a very fine line. I'm not sure which decision I should make.
Well, we have a question from Dr. Fowler.
Sure.
Sometimes we are the worst perpetrators of discrimination against ourselves. I'm thinking about how women reinforce patriarchy. For example,
Sure.
how do we break this practice in group?
Can you repeat the last part? I didn't hear. Craft what?
I'm thinking about how women reinforce patriarchy. For example, how do we break this practice in group?
Right. Yeah, that's a very good question. I speak up. I have, after a certain age, I've decided that I'm not going to take it anymore. So I always speak up, when I feel that, something is not kosher. I will speak up. I always speak up. We have to learn to speak up. And our generation, the boomer generation, is much more, prone to be silenced. We learn to be to keep our mouth shut. We grew up, that way, coming from a culture that is more discriminatory against women than the United States. It's, even more poignant. You have to learn to speak up. I've learned to speak up. So.
I asked this question in one of the other panels, and that is one of the failures of feminism was the fact that we alienated the male population by the gross generality that all men were bad. So how do we, in this particular instance, we should have learned from it. How do we move forward without making villains of them all? We can't do this without our counterpart. So how can we be more inclusive and not vilify an entire gender of what's happened in the past? How do we move forward hand in hand with that?
Yeah, it's a fair question, that doesn't have a very, straightforward answer. A conversation is very, keeping the lines of communication open is very important. But who are we communicating with? If people are shut off to what we are discussing, what the issues are, if we're not able to address the issues because the other person is completely shut off to any, of the ideas we're presenting, I don't know how we can penetrate that wall and get through to some people. But having having communication is very important. Keeping those lines of communication open and discussing what the issues are.
Okay.
I think is important, but it has to do with the person you're discussing these issues, and what this person's agenda is. If we're talking about an entire population, I don't think we can, generalize like that.
Okay.
Because different people bring in different issues to any conversation, and their backgrounds and their biases are deeply rooted and come from their cultural backgrounds. And we can't just put it on the so-called feminists to educate everybody about everything, because everybody has to be wanting to be educated.
Excellent. Dr. Fowler's following up with, often others in our own groups do not realize that they are under the boot of patriarchy. How
Yes.
can we help them see it?
Well, same situation here as well. It's not very easy to open someone else's eyes and show them, what it is that they're doing, if they're not willing to, if they don't open up their minds and accept what is coming toward them. You can open somebody's brain and put stuff in. The person has to be wanting to accept what's going on, take in the information, and objectively examine the information. Some women of my age are not willing to have that conversation. So it's very difficult to get through to some people, whether those people are male or female, if they're set in their ways and they're not willing to listen. Even if you come up with examples and studies and research, they don't care because they believe what's fed to them throughout their lives.
Okay.
I'm not sure how we can do it. I would like to find a way to get through to everyone, but it's not really possible, I think. And especially with the situation we are in right now, everything's political, everything is polarized. I don't, I don't even want to touch it at this point.
Mm.
We have to get, I think after the election, maybe we can have a conversation that's not, I'm hoping our lives are not going to be so political and so polarized so that we can begin to have such discussions more openly and more and accept other people's opinions and comments and ideas rather than shut them down and make fun of them or dismiss them altogether.
Kelsey asks, patriarchy hurts men as well.
Yes.
We need men who realize that to help us. And then she says, it's about the power of allyship. Can you address that, the power of allyship?
Well, the men who there are some men who understand how patriarchy puts the brakes on their development as well. Like, for instance, I could give you an example. My son-in-law is one of those men, and my daughter is very lucky to have him. And he's very lucky to have her as well, because they kind of work out all these issues that society presents them, presents every day of their lives, and they find solutions to the problems together. And that's not very common in the couples that are my age. I don't see many open lines of communication between people in my age group than I see in some younger people, like my daughter and my son-in-law, for instance. There are quite a few younger people who haven't really bought into that idea of the magnificence of the white man, and that the white man can never do wrong. And they do examine their lives and their attitudes and their behaviors on a daily basis. But I've seen that in younger people. I haven't seen that in older men, at least the men that I know. They aren't so open to accept other opinions and other ideas. Why answer the question, Mitchell?
Well, watching the conversation with Jacqueline and Kelsey, that we need to recognize when we're getting messaging that's focused on dividing us. I'm going to shift gears a little bit here. The WNBA has had an amazing year. It's a Women's National Basketball Association.
Yes.
But the media has done everything it can to pit the best rookie, a white woman, Caitlin Clark, who has changed the entire structure. Everybody, rising tide lifts all boats is what they have been trying to do. They're all getting endorsements. And some of the black players that came in also, and the media has done everything it can to make it look like these two women hate each other, and have brought race into a sport that is predominantly black. But now, so how much does the media play a role in our inability to recognize that a rising tide lifts all boats, that we are all in this together to get this happening? What is their role? Not just apart from, black or white or men or women. Doesn't the media play a larger role? Because it's juicier to divide. It's juicier to be negative than it is to say, look at these great women who are brilliant. So what do you think? How do we get to impact the media so that they aren't involved in dividing us? Because they are.
They are. Audience are not going to tune in or get on social media and follow media outlets that talk about the greatness of this him and this person and that player and this other player. but they do get clicks and they do get audience when they have something negative to say, because unfortunately, human beings feel like when they hear negative things about other people, feel superior to those people because they won't be the same. They won't act that way had they been in their position. So they're trying to spin the news so they can sell the news.
Okay.
I don't have a television in my house since 2010. I got rid of the television, and that's one of the reasons that I got rid of the television. I don't watch the news anymore. I read the outlets that I need to read, I feel are more objective, and that's what I read. I used to appreciate the New York Times, and I think they're ridiculous at this point. It's sensationalism and not objective news reporting at this point. And I thought, newspapers like the New York Times and the Washington Post would be more objective. And that's not the case anymore. It's not just like the TV channels, it's also newspapers that are doing this. They've all become the National Enquirer.
That's true.
I don't know how we can fix that by not giving them the views, by not following them in social media, by not reacting to what they're doing. I think it's the only way. We have to shut them off to shut them down or change the way they behave.
Okay.
Become again like traditional media, like reporting that's objective. It's backed by facts and not by fabrications, and not giving reporting something is not giving it a spin. It's reporting it as is. And they're giving everything a spin.
Right.
Everything is a story. It's not reality. Well, National Enquirer.
All right. Back to Dr. Fowler. It's an age-old cycle. For example, there has always been a clash of classes. The rich rile up the lower and working classes with fear of the other. The working classes turn against each other and do the work of the rich, who sit back and watch them shatter the working class power to organize for better lives. It's happening again. How do we not see this? What's happening that we are oblivious?
We see it. We're discussing it. We see it. Many people within the middle class don't see it. I don't know why. I don't understand. And you can't show them that what what they believe and is true is not true. They don't accept it. I have had conversations that are quite disheartening and upsetting by people who are going to be and have been financially and emotionally and personally affected negatively by their decisions and opinions. And they still persevere and they still do it. I'm not sure how. There are some people who are not, I don't know, how can you offer redemption when they're not willing to do it? I don't know. How can you? I mean, we see it. There are many people who see it. And then there are those among our group who cannot see it.
Okay.
And there isn't much, I don't know. I've tried, trust me, I've tried. And I've given up on many occasions. When you start discussing something, like I would start discussing something, the conversation would come up with about something negative that is not so, like for instance, the middle class and what it has become of it in the recent years. And the perception is completely different from mine in certain cases. People who see it, they agree immediately and we have a good conversation. And people who don't see it are not willing to have the conversation because their opinion is the opinion. And if you try to show them that there's something else out there and they're not quite getting it, they're just going to tell you what you believe is the same as I believe. So I have I read it online, so your research is not better than my research. I Googled it, so I know what I'm talking about. I don't know. You can't really change people's minds today. And again, it has to do with the polarization of everything. Everything it has become political. I mean, look at what happened with COVID. I mean, in hospital settings where, let's say, masks are very important to control the spreading of disease and infections to patients who are vulnerable, doctors refuse to wear masks because they feel restricted. I mean, I thought I would never experience something like that in this lifetime after all the studies about infection control. And now there are doctors who are saying, I don't want to wear a mask, I'm restricted.
Okay. Kelsey is following up with, we'll have to completely reframe the way engagement is rewarded monetarily. LK, your question made me think of the term rage bait. Truth isn't
Yes.
in the outlets. We consumers and our engagement are the product. Can you
Yes.
address that comment?
Yes. One of the ways we can do that is by blocking all, first of all, people can get rid of their televisions like I did. And secondly, we can block in social media all the news outlets that print or discuss issues that polarize us further and create issues that have to do with race when there's no such thing, and pitting one person against another person, or accepting one person's behavior and condemning another person's behavior when the behaviors are the same. So I don't condone that on social media. All those outlets are blocked. I don't want to hear what they have to say, not only because it's upsetting, but because I don't want to give them the clicks. So even if it's one, we can do it one person at a time, I think.
You've come back to social media a couple of times, and I think that women in our age group, people in our age group may have a better and easier time of doing what you're suggesting. But when we're talking about generational issues in the younger generations, the Gen A that were born between 2010 and 2025, who were born into this technology, this is all they know. How do we reframe all of this to get them to understand that so much of their information that is polarizing is incorrect information, it's disinformation, it's misinformation? How do we grab onto the younger generations who don't know anything else but social media?
Well, I see what my daughter does with my grandchildren. I have a grandson who's 14 and a granddaughter who's 11. And for many years, they had limited access to technology and they were doing other creative things to pass their time. But it starts from the parents. In many states, we can say it can start from the schools because we know what's happening with that. Like primary and secondary schools right now in some states are banning books. I don't even want to get into that. It's terrible and it makes me sick to my stomach. But those parents who understand what's going on do have discussions with their kids, like my daughter and my son-in-law with my grandchildren. They have discussions with their kids all the time about what's happening in the world. So the kids are aware of what's discriminatory and what's not. But even, a little bit older children, they're not into news outlets anyway. They may get their information third or fourth hand, 4 times removed, like Plato said. And that's a problem, but they're not interested in giving clicks to the New York Times for the most part. Perhaps after college, they might be interested in checking some of those outlets out. But up until that college age, they wouldn't be interested in newspapers. My grandchildren are not. And they're not allowed to have, even though they're 14 and 11, they're not allowed to have social media accounts yet. So, I mean, it's up to the parents to control the environment of their children up to a point and up to a certain age, if they can. But the children have to have other outlets to express, to other creative outlets. Like, for instance, my granddaughter fences and does a lot of different things with inventions. She's going to the National Invention Convention next year because she created this soap that glows so you can see the germs if you haven't washed your hands correctly. And my grandson is a percussionist. He's a drummer. He lives, breathes, and eats and sleeps drums and percussion. So they have other outlets to express their creativity and their interests, so they're not cooped up in front of a TV or in front of a tablet or a phone. They have all of that, but they're not on those all the time. It has to do with the parents.
Do we have any other questions from the attendees?
Thank you. I appreciate all the questions. I don't know if I answered them correctly, but it's a very difficult topic. It's very difficult to come to terms with what's happening in the world today, and be able to deal with all these issues because they're hot button issues and they're topics that are in some cases, they're difficult to discuss in certain situations. So it depends who the people in your circle are and how far your circle expands. So
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming to the conference.
it is my pleasure. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss this issue that I think
I hope we'll see you next year.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference. And
Yes.
this is us signing out.